Good evening. Welcome to another show. So I have a few things to cover. I'm starting a little bit early. This was scheduled for 5:30, but I'm here, ready to go. So, couple things to report on. There has been some shenanigans going on. Tom Rabbit is back, and he's been doing more content. And some of the stuff that he's been covering have been heroes of Darth Dawkins that probably aren't what Darth Dawkins thinks. The first one was Ryan Mullins, who's a PhD in philosophy, who thinks presuppositional apologetics is crap. Those are pretty good. I think there's 2 videos on that. But this one didn't surprise me at all. So P-Mars, who also goes by the name E-Bike Jesus on places like, what was that one called? The chat one. Clubhouse. He has frequently been paired up with Darth, been his wingman, been like his, I don't know, like a body double or whatever. And he's been kind of trying to push himself into some of these like kind of theology bro, philosophy bro debate spheres. In fact, I think he had a discussion on modern day debate, was set up with somebody and did a little bit of a philosophy Donnybrook, if you will. But now it's been found out that he has a Chatterbait account, and he does that as well. Now, I'm not particularly judgmental about people that use or are members of, or whatever their rank is when it comes to Chatterbait. I couldn't really care less. There's plenty of arguments to be made for and against the idea of kind of commodifying one's own self-gratification. It's a little dystopian, but it's part of their sexuality, part of whatever they're doing. I don't think it's necessarily unhealthy. I think aspects of it could be. But if you're somebody like P-Mars, who, like I said, seems to be trying to establish himself with a kind of online persona of being involved in these debate circles, he also has a presence on Chatterbait, which seems to be a little off-brand. I don't know. Maybe he's going to try to merge the two together. Let's hope not. I think that would be remarkably strange. Let's see a few people are here early. Special shout out to Kent Hovens, CPA. Good to see you, Kent. Well, I should just say CPA. You're not Kent Hoven. He was one of several people that sent me links to this particular one. He sent me the direct link. I think John Fabiano contacted me about it. My brother called me about it. And I'm like, I'm not really surprised by this, given some of the stuff he used to do years ago to porn bomb people's channels. So I don't know. It seems normal. I mean, for him. I've been active a lot lately. Yeah, probably not as much as I'd like to, but I did just demonetize. So I canceled the YouTube partnership thing, the AdSense thing, and I'm tired of messing around with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just kind of doing these casually. I'm thinking about trying to get away from doing these episode things too and go back to just doing straight up trolley videos where every picture is just a scene from a movie I like. PMAR starts out with what? Yeah. I thought PMARS was Jill at first. Now that would have been an exciting revelation. And that would have also not surprised me, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure how I would have reacted to that answer. What? Yeah. Good to see you. Yeah, PMARS. He's got his own Chatterbait, at least according to these people. Now, I don't have it up here, and I'm not probably going to get into this because it's just people talking about what they found. And people were sharing links in a Discord channel where they apparently found links to his Chatterbait account, and the images line up. Like I think in one of them, like he has a slightly different username, but behind him in the background in the camera is the E-Bike Jesus logo, or something like that. My brother was saying something. So it's pretty decently confirmed from the sounds of it. So, hello, Amy. Good to see you. And Major Arms P-Mars comes off as a troll in that video. Yeah, I mean, to me, he always does. I think he's a toilet bug. He's dishonest. He's creepy. I do not like him. E-Bike. No, bike. Like e-bike, the electric bicycle. E-Bike Jesus. He had a little cartoon avatar, Jesus with a bike. But But yeah, anyway, that one's there if you're interested. It's 23 minutes long. I think it's a lot of back and forth with them, but Tom's reactions to it are pretty funny. But again, like for me, I don't care that PMars has this. What would irritate me though is listening to PMars get self-righteous and sanctimonious about propaganda and people being brainwashed by the media and stuff like that, and he's engaging in social media up to and including Chatterbait. Like, dude, you're a propaganda maker in a sense. I mean, we're all kind of on here sharing opinions or spraying them all over the place, as it were. Sorry for that image. But yeah, anyway, it's there if you're interested. I'm gonna stop sharing that. Let's see here. And let's get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, because this I got blocked by PineCreek, and I have the receipts for it. He called in to ParkerGetaJob, which I will put up right here. For those of you who don't know, let's see. Parker debates Trump supporters. Yes, right there. So I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen. There's some comments. One of the comments is from me. So I'm going to start playing this one. So he does these. Parker has a pretty big channel. I think he's over 130,000 subscribers, and he will do these marathon streams. And lately, it looks like he's done like 4 or 5 in a row, where he's just on for hours taking calls from Trump supporters, asking them about why they voted for Trump. Do they still support Trump now? What kind of policies? Why? This kind of thing. Doug called into this. So they had a long conversation. Excuse me. What on PMars is so toast. Yeah, there's no way he's going to live that down. I find it fascinating. A guy that took that video footage of me half asleep and drunk, taking my shirt off and going to bed during the pandemic, and he's like, "Oh, Jefferson tried to porn bob people with this." I'm like, I took my shirt off and went to bed. The most embarrassing thing is that it's at 4 o'clock in the morning and people are trying to get my attention, and I'm so tired and liquored up that I just wasn't paying attention and just went to sleep and never turned the stream off. The texts that I got later in emails were unforgiving. Some of them were understanding, but people gave me a lot of crap, and rightfully so. But this dude could not get over it. And now, oh, how the tables have turned. So why do I keep bringing up that video footage? Mostly because I think PMars thought I was super sensitive about it, and I wasn't. I would have been if I'd taken off my underwear, because that would have been really embarrassing for everyone. No, nobody wants to see that. Damn it, I missed a naked Jefferson on a stream. Actually, at the time this happened, I don't even think it was this YouTube channel. I don't think it was Jefferson Spatchcock as a channel. I think it was under a different name, but I wasn't naked. I was only half naked. You missed some beach nudity. That's it. Eagerly awaiting Darth's response to the PMars video. I mean, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I'm more interested to see what he's going to say about the Ryan Mullins thing, because he was like, when he got a chance to talk to him, he was really like excited, and he's talking to a hero. And it's like, okay, but that dude hates your approach, your attitude, maybe your face. He doesn't show his face. We've only allegedly seen it once. So, okay. Let's get into this. So I was surprised. This one kind of starts off right away, and I'm not exactly sure like how long they've been talking, but there's a little bit of back and forth and some technical issues with sound. So we'll jump into this. And this is showing 4 hours and 46 minutes. Obviously, they don't talk for that long. He's got other callers. I think they are on for at least 2. Obviously, I'm not going to cover all that. But the stuff that I heard at the beginning, there were a few points that I wanted to make. And I also made these comments in writing on, because Doug went and made a lot of not a lot, but a decent amount of content based on this exchange. So, which he tends to do. He has a long conversation with somebody who's a liberal or a leftist, and then he mines that for content and like, oh, look at what this weirdo said here, and look at how goofy he looked there, and look at this crazy response over here. So keep that in mind.
Actively, like, not listening to the Supreme Court, doing exactly what JD Vance talked about, right? Literally just not listening and defying the Supreme Court.
I think what I want to ask you, and it's not a debate,
in some circumstances.
Hey everyone, big heads up, Paleo Valley's running a sale on all their meat sticks right now. You can get 30 sticks for $36.
Oh, I thought this
Okay,
was
but
fun.
you would prefer we've vet
there he
before
is.
they even come into the country.
Looking at him indicates that he's like good to vote for.
He got so much more aura than Kamala. How are you saying her name?
Immigration was probably the #1 thing for me.
Okay. What about immigration?
I think that it can be very harmful for a society to.
So he's asked him, why he's a Trump supporter. Doug's affirmed that. Doug said the biggest issue for him was immigration, right? And now he's getting into his reasons. Why is immigration the #1 issue? And he's already saying it's unhealthy for society
to have too many people come in too fast unlawfully. And so I was
too fast unlawfully. Is that the problem? We were allowing too many people in too quickly and too unlawfully. I thought the issue was that there were too many being allowed in too quickly. And because they were asylum seekers, which people like Doug will do that. I mean, I don't know if he does air quotes with his fingers, but they kind of paint it that way. Like, these people are just exploiting a loophole. They're coming in, claiming asylum, but really all they want to do is skip the line instead of doing the actual long affirmative application for regular immigration. All these refugees supposedly are entering in the country, even though most of the increases that we saw, a big portion of those increases were actual refugee crises that occurred during and after the pandemic, during the tail end of Trump's run and the beginning of Biden's, even though they still relied on Title 42, like I've said before. The first 2 years or so of Biden's term, they used Title 42. It's sort of a catch and release thing. So it's interesting to hear this. Too unlawful, too fast, too many. I would be willing to concede that there could be issues with too many, given that you have refugee crises happening, but that's different than immigration. Affirmative applications for immigration have a set number, and they're applying in advance before they're allowed to come. Asylum seekers are escaping one place for here. That's different. So yes, you could have too many people coming here too quickly, but it's not unlawful if it's asylum seeking. They get to do that because we have agreed to international laws on this. We have our own laws on this. We've agreed to do that. So the thing to point out here, and I'm talking too much and not getting enough into the video, the thing to watch for here is as they talk about this, Parker just sort of goes with the flow of this conversation. But Doug will frequently pivot implicitly between asylum and immigration without clarifying which one he's talking about. It's a common problem that he has with this issue. It's a common problem that a lot of right-wing opinionators have.
Hoping for a orderly, lawful way of immigrants coming in.
Mm-hmm. So do you agree with the bipartisan border bill by the Democrats?
There were some good things in it, some bad.
It had everything in it that Trump did.
Well, I don't know. I really don't think it was needed to accomplish the goal.
What's the goal?
The goal is to have more lawful entry of immigrants.
Okay, so you want more legal immigration. Okay, so then why don't we just make it so that anyone who's in the country who hasn't committed a violent crime or has a history of committing violent crime or any bad crime like that, well, then they should be allowed to be a citizen, because then that would incentivize them to get legal citizenship, correct?
To me, then it becomes an issue of fairness. So have you ever been to Disney?
Okay, what about that's unfair?
Disneyland or Disney World?
I've been to Disneyland. Yeah.
Have you ever been in one of those long lines for an hour?
Mhm.
And then how would you feel if someone cut in front of you and didn't have to wait at all?
They actually have those things, you know, that they have like at Disneyland. They have like these little passes that every once in a while.
Yeah,
you
but
get-
Yeah, you're allowed to pay extra to cut in line. This is not a great example for Doug to use. Maya's here. Didn't your brother do this yesterday? He did. So I'm doing it now. But I promise mine has a punchline. Doug blocked me. The hurt and shame that I feel.
to the front of the
can
line.
you answer my question? Let's say you personally,
Totally fine with it.
you're totally fine.
If you pass the law, let's say you had somebody that had been here waiting for 3 or 4 years, and they're going through the original old slower version of that, and then you change the law, and anyone who's here, and like he said, passes a background check, no criminal record or anything, can just apply and become a citizen. The people that have been here waiting are gonna automatically gonna become citizens. There's no cutting in line. They're here now. They don't have criminal records. They make a phone call, they do an application, they pay a fee. Application's done, they're citizens. Who's jumping the line there?
Fine with waiting in line for 1 hour, and then someone who hasn't waited at all just cuts in front of the line.
They can literally do this at Disneyland and Disney World. That's what Parker was trying to explain to him. Yes. But there are people that do not like the system. In fact, actually, if you study the logistics of it, it actually slows down the line for everybody. Will they get rid of it? Probably not.
Yeah, that's the process of how Disneyland operates.
No,
I'm totally fine
Disneyland-
with Disneyland operating in the way it does currently in terms of the
so
line.
you're okay with line cutting?
Yeah, the fast passes. Yeah.
No,
Allison,
I'm not
I think
talking about.
you're-
I'm not talking about fast passes. I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be Disney. It could be anything. A long line. You're in line, and someone just cuts it in front of you and doesn't have to wait at all. You're okay with that?
If it's an unjustified line, then absolutely. Like I think that the line shouldn't even exist.
Now, see, Parker's getting at something that I think is actually kind of interesting. Like, oh, okay. Do you want to, I don't know why people don't ask Doug about this. Oh, did you want to preserve the current status quo of a crappy, sloppy, inefficient administration just to do it? Do you like the sort of passive-aggressive cruelty of an incompetent bureaucratic process? Does that need to be preserved over the intention, which is people that want to be here and we would benefit from them being here, get to come here and stay here legally and become citizens more quickly and legally? No. I want the long line around the block, and you need to show up with every single piece of documentation you ever had. And if you're missing one thing, straight to El Salvador, go right to jail.
An unjustified line.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll give you an example, right? If it is the case that there's going to be some unnecessarily lengthy line that you don't need.
Exactly. I don't think Parker asks him about this. Redfang writes, Sweet Potato Hitler wants people to pay $1 million to get a citizenship. That is skipping the line. Yeah, it's a $5 million gold card. And the interesting thing about that is it's not citizenship. They're paying $5 million to get permanent residency. Special permanent residency. Gold card is basically like a green card. So you're getting permanent residency. And I think with that, you get special consideration for your application for full U.S. citizenship. So it's somewhere in between. But it costs a mere $5 million. Doug's got no problem with that. That'll go along with the hypothetical he gives Parker that he's given me and so many other people. You got two people that you're choosing from. You can only choose one. They're both exactly the same, except one's poor and the other one's a millionaire. Which one do you go with? Why am I in charge? What am I choosing them for? What are they doing here? Are they immigrants? Are they asylum seekers? What's going on? I need a little bit more. The hypothetical that he ends up getting into is just for some reason you're in charge, you're the bouncer at a bar, and you get to open the line for one of these two. One's filthy rich and the other one isn't. So treat the United States like a choosy club, looking only for the most attractive and wealthiest people. Neat, interesting take on the U.S. immigration and asylum process.
Need to go through in order to be able to have a efficient process. Like you're going to just literally allow more people in quicker, right? Through having a investment in the system to make it go faster, but we choose not to. So we make the system purposefully, backed up. Obviously it would make sense in that context because it's purposefully backed up, right? And it's unnecessary.
Purposely backed up. But do you think it takes time to do background checks on people?
Sure, but not 5 to 7 years on average.
It does not. I used to do background checks in a previous job. They are quite quick. Now, if you're doing like the full round, like through Interpol and stuff and things like that can take a little bit of time. But I mean, I don't think it takes years.
Allison, thank you for the 5 membership subscriptions. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Allison. You have to agree with that. That's purposefully backing up the immigration process because you want to limit how many people are coming to the country.
What makes you think it's purposeful?
Because that's what Republicans say all the time.
Doug started off with it's too fast, just too many, too quickly, and too unlawfully. Doesn't it stand to reason that what his position is? You need to slow them down, you need to reduce their numbers, and only the best and brightest and most legal get in. Why would they? Why would their intention be to intentionally? You put bureaucratic processes in line to slow things down. That is the point of a bureaucratic process. Otherwise, people just come across the border. They pick the state they like. They look around. They ask about getting a job. They start working. They start spending their money. Next thing you know, they buy property. The whole point of making them go through a vetting process is to slow down who's coming in, to determine why they're coming in, for what reasons, well, and what means do they already have? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? Jesus, Doug.
Donald Trump says it. It's not. It's very clear in the rhetoric. I mean, how many people do you want in the country every year to immigrate? Do you think there's a specific number?
I think Parker should have asked Doug, do you know what the limit is? Actually, he should have asked, is there a limit? And if so, what is it? Because there is one.
No, I don't think there's good data on what's the best optimum. But my main issue is that we should know who's coming into the country as best as we can. That's reasonable, right?
He'll do this quite a bit. Oh, that's reasonable, right? That we know who's coming into the country. To what extent do we need to know them, and for what purposes? Do we need their entire life story if they show up here to go to Disney World? Everything, if you think about what Doug is talking about, I want you to try doing this, especially if you don't like me, don't like my coverage, and don't like the way I bag on Doug. I want you to listen to when Doug's talking about immigration and imagine that he's not talking about immigration. Just substitute it for tourism. And then ask yourself the question Doug asked Parker that he does. That's reasonable, isn't it? Is it reasonable? Like if you can allow, like he'll get into this a little bit. You don't want to take the chance of allowing at least one criminal in, right? One criminal to do what? Be a refugee, be a permanent U.S. citizen, or spend 5 days in Orlando. What are we talking about? That's important. What does he mean with that line, that it needed to wait longer to become a citizen? Because if you're already a citizen, you're not in any line, right? I'm lost. Well, not only that, but if he's talking about the people who are permanent residents, and I think that's probably his thing. Usually what happens in the U.S., you come here, you get sponsored, you become, first you can have a visa, then you can become a permanent resident. That's when you get a green card. And then I think after a certain amount of time, you can apply for full U.S. citizenship. And I think what he's saying is like, well, hey, wait a minute, because Doug was here for damn near a decade before he got full U.S. citizenship. He's only had it for 2 years, and now he's talking like one of these idiots that paid $8,000 for their bachelor's degree back in like '81, who's like, wait a minute, I had to pay for my whole degree. How come these new young kids get loan forgiveness and stuff? Because they paid $88,000 sometimes a semester. You fuck. There's a huge difference between the price in education has gone up incredibly high. And you're not factoring into account compound interest. They could have paid off their principals, but thanks to the magic of compound interest, they're just paying in perpetuity because their bill was so much higher than yours. You were able to pay yours off faster. You paid down into the principal quicker. You paid less in interest. How come you got that and we don't? Is the question that we should be asking you. But instead, it's anybody over the age of like 65, apparently. I just don't know how these kids can't scrape together some money out of the old piggy bank there and get themselves a doctorate. Like, Apparently you haven't looked at a college catalog in the last 50 fucking years. Yeah, this idea that like, well, you need to wait your turn because I'm gonna get mine first. Like, okay. And then what happens when somebody like Doug gets his first? He wants to make sure that no one else gets it. We want to make sure that the right people get in here. Who? See, I don't think Doug's concerned about unqualified people getting into the country. I think he's more concerned about much more qualified Canadians and Mexicans getting in here that make him look like a toadstool. I think it'd be kind of interesting. It's like, oh yeah, we've got X number of Canadians. One of them's this Doug guy who runs a YouTube channel and does business valuations in Tucson. Like, well, you know what? We got a bumper crop of 50 of them, and they're all great. Like 20% of them went to McGill. Let's get rid of. We got to make room. Sorry, Doug. You need to go back to Mennonite cow country. See you on the prairie.
Oh, absolutely. That means that we should incentivize people who are in the country who are undocumented, right, by giving them a pathway to citizenship if they've not committed violent crimes or bad crimes, right?
Yet.
So that we know who they are.
Right.
Yet. That's irrelevant. That's completely irrelevant. Oh, they haven't done them yet. Okay. This is why it's safe to say that Doug's position on this, if genuine, he voted for Donald Trump because his primary concern was immigration. He's deranged. It doesn't matter how many facts you show them that the immigrant populations that we have in this country have lower crime rates than population clusters of native-born U.S. citizens. It doesn't matter if you show them that. And he just admitted there that's the problem. Like, all this talk about, isn't it reasonable that we find out what the criminal record that they had? Well, that implies in the past. Now, all of a sudden, he's like, well, yet we don't know what they did yet, right? I'm gonna take that back.
So you
Crimes, right? By giving them a pathway to citizenship if they've not committed violent crimes or bad crimes, right?
Yet.
So that we know who they are.
I could understand if he was saying we don't know what they've committed yet until we run all the checks. But Parker's sitting there talking about like, well, we know that they haven't done that, so why not give them we know their criminal they don't have a criminal record. So why not provide them an easier pathway to citizenship? Their criminal record's fine, right? They have committed no crimes, right? Doug's response, yet. Okay. Why are they I'm just wondering, does Doug consider himself more apt to commit crimes because he's from Canada?
Right. So you rather vet them while they're in the country rather than out?
I would rather vet them at any point in time in that process. I'd rather them be vetted rather than not vetted. Correct.
Well, let me ask you.
I'd rather them to be not exploited than to be
right. I agree with you. It's better to vet than not vet. But you just said
I would rather vet before, right? But given that the process is inefficient, I understand that we would vet after in some circumstances.
Okay, but you would prefer we vet before they even come into the country, yes?
These are the kinds of questions that this is boorish behavior from Doug. He's already answered this question like 3 times already. Yes, I would prefer it, but I don't think that should preclude us from running background checks on the people that are already here and providing them a pathway to citizenship now and making it easier, streamlining it.
Absolutely, but there are plenty of tourists that come to the country that aren't fully vetted in a certain sense. Allison, thank you for the $5. Thank you so much. So I don't know why you're only applying this process to.
No, I would apply this to even people flying in from other countries and
asylum. You agree that the asylum process, right? In some instances, there's going to be people with valid asylum claims that before we even went through the process, right, we're going to allow them in the country. Or do you fully and 100% disagree with the asylum process?
During the Biden administration, I wouldn't say fully, but mostly, yeah.
Yeah, he does. But you have to ask yourself, why would you disagree with the asylum process during the Biden administration? Was it because right-wing media had created a narrative that it was their fault? That the Democrats were doing that to rig votes? Doug was susceptible to that line of inquiry. He used to make videos suggesting that it was possible. He made videos talking about how he wanted to run a test He would obviously, make anyone that perpetrated the offense that he wanted to test about, allow them to go and vote fraudulently, and then give them a preemptive pardon for doing it, because you're just doing it for research, but to see what they could get away with. He's claimed that he could have easily voted when he was a permanent resident. So Doug's got a head full of filth that needs to get kind of cleaned up, but he's running on narrative. He's not running on facts. And when he's being asked to justify his positions, which I chose Trump because immigration's a concern of mine. But what about immigration concerns you? Too many, too quickly, too illegally, too much crime. With the exception of the refugee crises, the number of immigrants isn't much different. And by immigrants, I mean affirmative applicants, the people that are applying in advance to become a citizen, and they are looking to relocate here in advance, not people that like the news would terrify you. Well, they're just crossing the border, and then once they're here, we're never going to get rid of them. That's what Fox News wants you to believe. Many of those people are asylum seekers. That's a different category than other immigrants. Affirmative, you also have kind of what they call, I think, a defensive application. You think you came here on some kind of visa, student visa, work visa, whatever. But now you're concerned things are going off in your homeland, and you want to make sure that you don't get sent back there. So you apply for asylum while you're here and working or studying, because you want to protect yourself from being sent back to that country.
Oh, okay. What do you mean by so there are some circumstances, at least, where you do believe that they should be able to stay in the country before you actually vet the claim?
No, that they have to go through the port of entry, number one, and then that's where they're vetted.
Okay, so vetted at the port of entry. So,
Yeah.
Which already happens. It's just that because there's only so many ports of entry, there are people that are willing to cross it illegally and then declare asylum. Because they're trying to do that at the port of entry too, but the line is long. So what Doug wants you to believe is that, well, none of their claims are legitimate. I just don't understand why they can't just wait back there. Why can't they just wait there? You'll find out more here in a couple seconds.
You can do it immediately. Okay, so then you don't need
Exactly,
a 6 month. You don't even need a 6 month process under your view. You don't even need a 5-year process. You can do it immediately at the border for everyone.
No. You can still do your preliminary vetting at the port of entry. But what happened under the Biden administration is people were crossing at a non-port of entry, claiming asylum, and then
Once they're picked up on a civil infraction, which they have the right to do per our law,
getting to stay in the country.
You understand that he
they're allowed to stay in the country pending their court date.
did sign a bill specifically to get people to go through ports of entry, and also I don't even see how
Right, yeah.
I don't even see how that is an issue, given
But
that
the question is of enforcement.
The under international law, they did not.
It was enforced. I don't know Doug is just repeating at this point. You can just tell he's internalized a lot of really ridiculous talking points. The Biden administration took a lot of heat as soon as they got in and during his administration from immigrant activist groups because of the way that they kept certain policies that the Trump administration had. They kept Title 42 until the beginning of 2023, past the point of real necessity. Once they released the state of emergency of the pandemic, that status failed. Title 42 wasn't legally justifiable anymore, so they had to give it up. But the whole catch and release process Title 42 allowed, where you didn't actually have to accept an asylum claim, and anybody coming in that way because they crossed at a non-official point of entry could be picked up and thrown right back across the border. If you're interested in this, you can actually look up the statistics in immigration studies on the number of repeat entry attempts during the Trump administration. They are an order of magnitude higher than what they were during Biden's administration, even though the first 2 years of the Biden administration had the same policy in place. And Biden's administration, along with Kamala Harris, they both took grief for this, and they both sided with the Democratic bill that was going to allow for mandatory caps, pullbacks, rollbacks, asylum denials, an increase in spending, an increase in hiring, faster enforcement, more judges, and with more leeway to deny asylum claims. And remember, the Republicans came out against it. even though it gave them everything that they wanted. And for whatever reason, the Democrats thought that that was like a layup. Like, no, it just made it seem like all Trump had to do is come out and transparently be like, well, don't give them that win. And everybody's like, that's our boy Trump.
Not have to go through a port of entry. That's something designated specifically that Republicans begged Biden for, and Biden literally conceded to the Republicans on that one.
Well, if you're going through by international law, then you have to go to the first country that will take you.
Incorrect. This is incorrect. There isn't an international law. The only thing that comes close to being an international law on this, or there's two. There is a U.S.-Canadian pact that recommends this, I think, under certain circumstances, but I don't think it's a blanket application. And that's an agreement between those two countries. There is another one called the Dublin Regulation, which is used in the EU that sort of bottlenecks entry into the EU from people coming in from the East and in Greece and Italy. And it's received an enormous amount of criticism because it bottlenecks it in two strapped countries. And then from what I understand, doesn't really provide them much in the way of aid for dealing with that immigrant crisis. But that's where they've got to come from first. But there is no, out of the two big accords, was the 51 and the 67 protocol. The 51 convention, I think, and the 67 protocol. The 51 one was based on establishing an international standard of laws for all the people that were dislocated after World War II. The U.S. didn't really ratify that one. In 67, it was modernized. So it didn't just apply to everything that happened before 51, and it didn't limit it to the number of countries in just Western and Eastern Europe. It became an international standard. And in that international standard, for most of international law and compacts, this idea that you can only go to the country right next door to you and have to apply there first, and then you have to keep playing that like a game of checkers or something, that is not a real thing. That is something that conservatives invented in their head because it's wishful thinking. And they would like to think that because it exists under certain compacts between a couple partner countries, or there's the standard like in the Dublin regulation with the EU, that it must apply everywhere and that's how it needs to be. And it's just not being enforced. The Bidens were just allowing everybody to come in, like, because they can. Now, if you want to pass regulation that gets that restrictive, that's fine. But you're going to need international cooperation to get that to work. And the U.S. ain't there. It wasn't there under Biden, and it sure as hell isn't there now. There's no goodwill when it comes to this issue. The one thing that Trump might have been able to count on was being good with money and maybe seeing a juke in the economy for the first 6 months of his first term. Instead, we've had multiple crashes of the size and scale he predicted would happen if we voted for Biden or voted for Kamala. And that's not me being, partisan. That's just news from a couple of weeks ago. This is crazy. When Abbott was paralyzed, he won a massive 7-figure lawsuit and used it to bankroll his bid for governor. Once he won, he passed a law that capped such damages. Yep. You made it up a ladder or a ramp and you pull it up behind you. I got mine. Fuck y'all. Figure out your own loophole. That guy's a creep.
Which would be Mexico for many of them.
Wait, that's not necessarily true.
Are you sure?
No, it's not the next country right next to you.
No, the first country that will take you.
That is not true. That is not an international standard law.
Join a growing number of professionals who are advancing their careers with a graduate degree from the...
No.
It's not the first country that will just take you. It's going to be give me the language specifically that it uses.
He doesn't.
Isn't it about it's about going to be like that would protect,
well, you can Google it for yourself right now.
It's going to be based upon that protected class. So in some circumstances, right, the countries right next to them don't protect right against won't protect them in the case of that protected class. So they would be at the same issue that they would be seeking asylum from in the first place.
Yeah, he's right here. So, under normal circumstances, and the U.S. has kind of a goofed up asylum system on this as well. Oftentimes, in order to get approved for asylum, it's not just that you can claim that, the place that you're coming from is incredibly dangerous. You usually have to fit into some kind of persecuted class, and that provides the administrative cover to actually get you in there. If that protection, like say you're coming from, let's say Guatemala or El Salvador, that shit's going off there. You're of a protected, you think you might be in a protected class according to the U.S. standards, but in Mexico, they don't recognize it. You're not going to be able to get approved for asylum in Mexico, but you could apply for it in the USA. Thus, you can go. There's nothing. I mean, you don't have to look very far. If Doug is interested in this, all he's got to do is ask Grok. I know he likes the AI. All he's got to do is ask it, and it'll point him in the right direction. It'll even, I mean, sometimes it gets some of it kind of goofs up dates and stuff like that. Although I've never used Grok. I don't. Maybe it's absolutely horrible. But most of the AIs will, at least if you ask it to cite sources, will provide you with decent links where you can go and get the statistics on this kind of stuff, and the history of the laws, the names of those laws, when they were passed, and whether or not the U.S. is a signatory. Nicholas says, Trump voters like to complain about immigration under Biden and Obama, but will raise the point they deported more than Trump did, and then claim they had open borders. Yeah. It's not uncommon for Republicans to run against the Obama record when they're campaigning in Latino districts and say that Obama was the deporter in chief, and then turn around and do the shit that they're doing now.
Place.
Diabolical.
Roxanne, thank you for the $5. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Was that the case for Mexico?
It depends on the context. There are some people who do seek asylum from Mexico, but that's not true always. Now, for people who do seek asylum from Mexico, do you think they should remain in Mexico while they seek asylum?
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
They're seeking asylum from Mexico. Why would they remain in the country?
Oh, no. Oh, you said from Mexico. Yeah, I would say they would have to show that Mexico is persecuting them. Do you think Mexico is persecuting people?
Wait, but while they show that.
I like how he immediately pivots into a question of his own without, and it's just a complete, it's a complete grapefruit of a throw. Just, do you think Mexico's going after? That's not the point. That's not what he's talking about.
That process. Can it be in some circumstances there are valid asylum claims from Mexico?
Thanks for reminding, John.
And you understand that it doesn't have to be straight from like the Mexican government. It could be based on any other type of context, right?
If there's a valid claim of persecution from Mexico and you're a Mexican, then you would go through the port of entry. And then in that case, I'd be okay with them staying in the country.
But before you validate the claim?
Yeah, but that hasn't been the case for the last 4 years.
So then why were you?
Okay, so yeah, because administratively it hasn't taken into it. One of the things these guys like to talk about is like the violence from the cartels and stuff down there. So let's say that you've got a group of peasants that are in a cartel-controlled town, and they want to leave because they're related to another person who is friends with a journalist that once wrote something critical about that town or the cartel that runs it. They fear for their lives. They're not in a protected class. And so as far as like U.S. asylum goes, there really isn't anything that they can do for them. They're not being persecuted because they're Jewish or because of the color of their skin or, like I said, religion, or it's not even necessarily a political difference. It's not as if they're Marxists and the cartel is, anarcho-capitalists or vice versa. Like they can't, there isn't a determination to make on whether or not they have a protected status. And oftentimes that's one of the big reasons why asylum seekers get denied asylum here. They don't really fit into a bucket of a persecuted class, which is interesting because if you think about that, you have some identity politics built into our asylum stuff that I think if Doug really thought about would bother him.
Are you bringing this up as like an issue with me that like I'd be okay with people in the country before we validated the claim?
Okay, but did you hear how reasonable I was? I said in some cases, yeah, I would be okay with it. But
did you hear how reasonable I was? Who the hell says things like this out loud?
Would you admit that in most cases in the past 4 years, that most people were not seeking asylum from Mexico, meaning they're Mexicans seeking asylum from...
I agree. Most people were not.
Okay.
Yeah, the vast majority of people that were coming in seeking asylum were from Venezuela. There was one from Venezuela. There was Guatemala. Years before that, there was Nicaragua. I probably don't have those in chronological order, but many of those Central American and South American countries have had, fits and starts with this. Venezuela was I think probably the most recent one and one of the most dramatic. And it doesn't matter what those people went through in their country or what it took them to get out. That didn't stop J.D. Vance and Donald Trump from campaigning on a Colorado town being taken over by illegal Venezuelan gang members. And that was bullshit too.
So now practically we have a situation where if someone is claiming asylum, and by the way, the vast majority of people who claim asylum, their asylum cases are rejected.
The vast majority, many asylum cases are rejected. I think it's around approximately 63, 65%.
The vast majority. Are you aware of that?
So that's you're talking like 60% for other types of administrations. It was bumped up to 90% by Trump's administration. So I don't see why that would be rightful given like the
No,
historical
that's
trend of
showing you
things.
that when due process is enacted, there's the key.
No,
Listen to me.
There was a
Let me
natural
finish
trend
my
and then Donald
sentence.
Trump explicitly decided to do more.
Even with Biden, Obama, I think historically the vast majority of people who claim asylum do not meet the requirements of asylum.
When
Do you
say
agree or
vast
disagree?
So do you think 60% is a vast majority?
Oh, a majority. Okay, we can get
Sure.
rid of the word vast if you like. But do
Sure.
you agree with that?
Sure. That means you need to rework the process to make it faster for people who are for us to process the claims for people who are already in the country, because the issue is that you're gonna have 40% of people who have to stay in the countries that they're seeking asylum from in order to be able to who have valid asylum claims. And we want them.
Well, no, this is a problem for Parker, and I'll get into this as he explains the rest of his point.
If they have valid asylum claims to be in the country. I thought you guys
Right.
were so pro due process, right?
Yeah, well, if we do due process, historically it's been shown that people who claim asylum are full of it.
Incorrect. So, if any of you are interested in ever bringing this up with Doug, again, he's blocked me. In 2022, so this is a few years back, the Department of Homeland Security reported that 96% of asylum seekers passed credible fear screenings. If you look that up, DHS, credible fear screenings. These are the screenings that they do with asylum seekers to ask them, like, why are you coming to the United States? Like, you're seeking asylum. What's going on where you came from? 96% of them pass that credible fear screening. Only a fraction are approved. Criminal history is a common reason for denial. And most of those crimes can be very minor ones. So Doug is trying to paint this narrative like, no, they're up here just selling a story. Not according to DHS. Only 4% are full of it. The vast majority of them are credibly afraid of where they came from. But administratively, they're not going to make the cut because of something in their background check. So I guess those background checks are working a little bit better than he thought. And also, he needs to reverse his position on this, because he said this to me, and I said, I think you're full of it, Doug. I think that sounds like a bunch of hogwash. And the statistics right there. Credible fear screenings, DHS, 2022, 96% of asylum seekers passed it. That means that even according to the DHS, not exactly a bastion of Marxist leftists running that thing, stated that these people had credible fears. They passed their credible fear screening. Check. Where they came from is bad, and they're afraid to go back there. We agree. But they shoplifted once when they were 12. Hook them. They're done.
Please sign the petition and urge Congress.
So again, 40% of people, right, being valid asylum claims, right? You would not want to treat those 40% of valid asylum claims in a manner
Now, if they have a valid,
harmed.
is your main issue like the speed?
Yeah, I think the speed should go faster. That's what the.
Well,
I think Parker would be in a more dangerous position in this conversation if he knew that statistic. 96% of them have a credible fear screening. He'd be like, well, let him in. Doug would lose his shit. Well, I don't care that only 4% of them were full of shit. You know what? A bunch of them get denied because they had criminal records. Yeah, but they're refugees and they're terrified of where they came from. You agreed that part of being in the international community is to take in refugees and asylum seekers when things in their home countries go to shit. That's something that we agree to do with each other. If Doug just wants to come out and be like, no, I don't want to do that, that would be a lot more honest. But pretending like, no, what I want is a much more abusive, inefficient, slow-paced, bureaucratic nightmare that slows everything down to a crawl, so only the people that are going to get here are going to be the smartest, the most manipulative, or the wealthiest, because they can pay to cut in line, which is exactly what he voted for when he got somebody like Trump offering $5 million gold cards.
I don't necessarily disagree with you on speed, but well, I'm going to more of a
He absolutely does not want it to be. Jesus Christ. He has done videos where he watches videos of people crossing at checkpoints and at non-authorized checkpoints, going over the border. It's too many people, too fast. That's what he said at the beginning. One of the number one reasons for him being concerned about immigration was the rate at which people came here. Oh, I don't necessarily mind the speed. That's interesting, because that's not what you said at the beginning. What's the problem? The speed with which they arrive here and are physically present in the country, or the speed with which they are approved to be here? Because that's also incredibly quick, especially if they're asylum seekers. The problem is the final determination of asylum seeking takes 4.7 years. And that's if these people actually show up to their court case, if they haven't already left. Or in some cases, still on the docket, but got deported beforehand.
fundamental issue of, do we do this vetting process, this more so within the country or without? And I already conceded to you that there might be cases where it can be within, but I would say for the majority of the time, it should be without. I mean,
even in the case of Venezuela or El Salvador or Guatemala, Nicaragua.
Meaning that we do our vetting, the due process, while people are outside the country. Isn't that reasonable?
Not for Mexico. Not when you have them lined up in another sovereign country trying to get into your borders. Again, I think he's thinking about immigration here. It's not unreasonable if somebody is looking to relocate to another country because they want to do that. They want to work here. They want to go to school here. They're looking to just move there. And they go through the steps to do an affirmative immigration application. Absolutely. Evaluate them in advance. If you're talking about asylum, though, you're talking about a subsection of immigration. You're talking about refugee crises. Those are not individuals that will necessarily become U.S. citizens. They're not looking to become permanent residents necessarily. They're trying to get away from their country that is turned into, momentarily, a murder hole. If the United States can do something to make their country less murder holy, then maybe that will encourage them to move back home. It would be interesting to also see the rate of return for asylum seekers if, within a certain period of time, 4 to 5 years, things in their country calm down and return back to a peaceful level, and they're allowed to move back. I don't know if those statistics are kept, but if they are, I would be very interested in seeing them. But Doug seems to be equating asylum seekers with a type of immigrant who is trying to cut a corner. They're just saying, I'm coming from a shithole country and I'm really scared for my life and I need to come here because America's the best and it's safe. And Doug's like, ho, 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 hold the phone. I came here because I paid to come here. I paid for multiple degrees here. I married an American citizen here. I became a permanent resident here. Worked for a decade before I was allowed to become a U.S. citizen. And you're just going to come in here because you got some cock and bull, sad story. This is Doug's problem. Like, those people do not necessarily want from the United States what Doug pursued and got. They just don't want to get killed.
So, I mean, I think that in plenty of circumstances, we can do it while they're within, and it makes sense for us to do it while they're within because you're going to be impacting a high.
Again, if you're vetting people, it's perfectly acceptable to vet them after they've crossed the border when they're refugees because they're actively fleeing from the dangerous place. If it's immigration, that's fine. What Doug is talking about, like, they're coming too fast and too quick. We need to slow this down. Okay. Would you like to tell the person that applies on the app, your application's been received. Please allow 6 to 8 weeks. Try to avoid the death squads. We'll get back to you and answer our call. Well, you will only be called once. You will not be called again. And if you miss that call, you will go back to the beginning of the line. I know Doug is not into Doug is only into the narratives that kind of affect the way he looks at the world currently, which are terrible. But I'm kind of wondering if Doug has ever actually engaged in narratives involved around dystopia, either 1984, most classically, or even the movie Brazil. I would be willing to bet that he's unable to get the big points of those movies.
Percentage of the population that have valid asylum claims.
Right, but that's not what I asked. I asked, would you agree that there are at least some cases, if not the majority of the cases,
there could be some cases, right, where there could be say a particular thing that there's a flag in the system where this person could have a criminal background. Then you would want it in that context.
And like I said, that's what happens with these asylum cases. DHS statistics prove that. Over 90% of them are passing the credible fear screenings, but administratively, they're not. Their asylum is denied because of a criminal background or other administrative reasons.
Right. Other than that,
in some cases, there are issues where the asylum judges can have a rate of over 90% of asylum rejection simply based on their attitude.
Obviously, I think that people should be allowed to stay in the country, right, while their asylum claim is being processed. Allison, thank you so much for the 10 membership subscriptions. Thank you so much, Allison. W's for Allison in the chat. Thank you so much.
Well, so yeah,
you do well to confess. Think of your credit rating.
Yeah, maybe it's just agree to disagree on that one. But what do you believe that every immigrant that comes into the country? Oh well,
here
let's
put
put
you a certain question. I think I could frame it in a way in which would give us productive dialogue. So, in terms of this, how many, in a general terms, how long do you think it should take for people to get into the country?
how long should it? That's such a subjective question. I mean,
Yeah, of course, that's why I asked you.
But you've got to be thinking about this, Doug. Your concern was that it was too quickly, too many, and too unlawfully. So what's a slow enough rate? There's a lot of questions I have. Okay, you're terrified of the hordes that are crossing into that Fox News shows you. Does he sleep with a VR helmet on with Fox News playing? Just to encourage the nightmares. I don't understand why his brain works this way.
I think several years is okay, because, and here's why. I think it takes time to vet. I think it also takes time to see what's needed for the country. I'm not just talking about asylum now. I'm talking about all cases of immigration.
Okay, well, at least he's making the distinction. Let me point out why he's off to a bad start. Generally speaking, if you are going to do an administrative process where you're going to approve or disapprove somebody who's going to be coming in there, and the one thing that you're going to need from them is accurate paperwork and records, you don't want to make them wait. The longer, I'm an administrator, I work in a bureaucratic setting, you want to get you want to get that process moving as well as you can. You want the best, most recent records that you can get. You do not want to have them hanging around in limbo for months or years, because it's going to make their case even. You got to blow the dust off that thing, reacquaint yourself with it, and then hope to God that over that time they haven't lost access to that information, or the statute. Sometimes there's statute of limitations thing. Well, that's a crime thing, but there are record retention schedules for certain types of official documents that may not apply. So certain documents that you wanted to look at, now those records have lapsed. We can only go back 4 or 5 years. Well, it's been 7 years, and we need to know what was been going on with you for the last 10. Well, then we should have gotten started on this right away. Well, sorry, we had to keep you here because, like Doug says, maybe you're not right for the country. How would you fucking know? You didn't check, or you only checked enough to make sure that they never once were convicted of murder, and they haven't committed a DUI. And they got a couple $1 million on them. Guess they're good enough to come in, right, Doug? Oh.
So depending on what industries need what workers and so forth, I think.
What industries need what? Okay, so you want to run it like a communist system where you're actively selecting people. There's a pool of applicants out there, and you're going to grab from these groups like a dictator. Or like some kind of weird, overlord state where it's like, well, we need a 15% increase in smelters We got some that are on the run from Venezuela. So let's snatch them up before somebody else gets them.
I think that all takes time. And
It takes time to what? Figure out what they're good at? Figure out what they got? Figure out what they can do? They come into the country and they start working almost immediately. They pay more into our systems than they get out. Even if all they're doing is working in restaurants or working in hotels to start. If they put themselves through school, or if they've got some schooling and they're able to like finish those credentials and they're able to move on to bigger and better things, and they do that, even better. And they're doing that without the expectation of really getting anything from us as far as social comfort, social insurance, while paying scads of money into our system for us. And he's going to sit around here and like, well, I don't know if they're really worth a damn. Well, we're listening to a guy right now with two master's degrees, from what I understand, one of them in chemistry, and he's not doing that. He's working from home, from what I understand, doing business valuations and fucking around on YouTube. Did we need it? He can do YouTube from Canada.
And my, I guess, presupposition is that the United States government doesn't owe immigrants a thing.
You're right. They don't owe immigrants a thing. But if they're signatories, or they have passed laws in other applications with other obligations, mandating that they treat refugees and asylum seekers from certain countries, or from most countries, or even from all countries in certain ways, we are obligated to provide that to those asylum seekers and refugees under certain circumstances. So in that case, Doug, those asylum seekers are immigrants we owe something to, because we wrote a law obligating ourselves to them in those circumstances. If they're affirmative applicants for regular immigration, elective immigration, they just want to move here, he's absolutely right. We don't owe them anything. That's just somebody who would like to live in San Diego to experience the weather, or wants to live in New York and get into the theater or something like that. And they take the steps to fill out that paperwork, and they're doing it in advance because they want to move here. That's a different group. Do we owe them anything? I think that we owe them a transparent, honest process. Are they entitled to U.S. citizenship or even permanent residence? No. But asylum seekers are not necessarily looking for either permanent residence or citizenship. They are looking to escape a tragedy. They're trying to preserve their safety, their health, their life. That's different. And if you are in an international community and you pass laws stating that when this happens to your neighbor and these people need to flee and they can seek help from you, and you wrote that into law, you better believe you are fucking obligated to do it. That's the point. So you owe them that. You passed a law promising that you recognize that. That's the difference between asylum seekers and refugees and regular immigrants, Doug. What the fuck? Fabio says Doug wants a good 5-year plan. Yeah, just like any good communist. Seriously, the stuff that I hear coming out of his mouth, he sounds like a Soviet half the time.
And that's what we might disagree on that.
Well, I already gave my reasons for it, but I wonder if Parker even reacts to this.
You might think that there's an inherent responsibility of the United States to save as many people in the world as they can.
Under asylum seeking issues, if they pass international laws, they are obligated to do that. He's equating regular immigration again with asylum seeking. The asylum seekers are not looking necessarily for what he got. I can't believe he's too silly to get this. They don't necessarily want to permanently live here. They don't necessarily want to ever become a U.S. citizen. What they necessarily desire is not death. They'd prefer to not get killed or tortured, disappeared, raped to death, etc., from wherever the fuck they came from, buried under lava, swallowed by the sea, killed by floating space jellyfish, whatever the fuck it is. They are looking to come here so they can avoid that. If you can figure out how to make that better for them, they might just go back to that. But Doug is not thinking that. Doug thinks that asylum seekers are immigrant cheaters. This is his problem. In his heart, that's where the narrative is. In his twisted, Grinch little fucked up, soul, that's what he thinks is going on here. Because he wouldn't be this fucking inconsistent and discordant with the way he's talking about this shit. It makes no sense. Every other expression that he makes about this issue reveals some weird insecurity deep within him that I'd rather not know about.
Although I kind of agree with the sentiment that it's nice to help people, I would disagree with the sentiment that the United States has an obligation to save the world.
Unless there's a law. Josh Chilton says, we need to get Doug linked up with Pisco for debate. That's the conversation we need. Who's Pisco? If anybody can include the link for Pisco stuff in there, or maybe he's a Discorder.
And so if, let's say it takes 10 years, and we both would agree that that's too long. Well,
10 years to become a U.S. citizen or 10 years to get here?
It sucks for the immigrant, but we don't owe the immigrant anything.
Under certain circumstances, you sure do. And is he talking about whether or not they're allowed in here? They've got to wait for 10 years in their country before they're allowed in? Or do they have to wait for 10 years before they become a U.S. citizen? Those are two different things.
Okay, here's my question.
Did you hear what I said? I know you were very busy doing other stuff.
I was typing specifically down a note so that I could refer to you and respond to you.
Okay.
Is that fair? Right.
That's fair. But by the way, you can show my face if you want. It makes for better dialogue, I think.
No, it doesn't.
Sure. So in terms of Ellis
I'm pretty sure Parker must see him on his screen, and he just I'm sure does not do this. I'm like, no.
Island, right? Like, do you disagree with Ellis Island, right, level immigration in the early 1900s? Because it was a lot faster than that.
Do I disagree with Ellen a lot faster than what?
Do you know what Ellis Island is?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the early immigration in the early 20th century, but what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I'm asking you, do you disagree with the immigration that came to the country?
The speed?
Right? Yeah.
Or the
speed, or just in general, like the...
No, I don't necessarily disagree with the speed.
Oh, okay.
That's actually a good a good question. If I save a handful, then I'm saving the world. Some kind of fallacy there. This is the problem. Like, the United States is not putting itself in a position where it's going to save the world. It's putting itself in a position where it wants to save rural farmers from cartel violence in northern Mexico. And it's going to allow them to come here for a limited time as asylum seekers so that they can get out of harm's way. The same thing with Venezuelans. They're here on a protected status, or Jamaicans or Haitians. We weren't trying to save the world. We were trying to help our neighbors who were in danger. Remember, though, if you go back to Doug's early days, and even probably to some more recent ones, Doug does not believe in community. He doesn't believe it's something that he needs, and he's just not a fan. So the idea of being part of it, he doesn't really understand the obligations for it because he is a deranged psychopath.
But that was a lot faster than a few years.
Okay, well, what's your point?
Then why do you think it should have been faster then, but not now?
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did say it should take years.
He was just talking about maybe it should take 10 years. And when he's asking, so you disagree with the notion of Ellis Island, where they're just European immigrants are coming in and getting vetted probably within the afternoon. And Doug's again, like, well, I don't necessarily disagree with the speed. Take you back to the beginning of this conversation. Too many, too quickly, too unlawfully. Michael Deaton says, we aren't saying shit about economics, and America wants to draw motivated people from foreign countries. Doug thinking is altruism is dimwit stuff. Doug thinking that's altruism is dimwit stuff. Yeah. Yeah, most of the time what the U.S. is trying to do is try to attract the best and brightest. And this fear-mongering about like having to deal with refugees and some shit is probably going to make it much more difficult to deal. Because, I mean, eventually any of the people that are kind of in the MAGA orbit are attributing this kind of, I mean, look what they did when some of the faithful were talking about, no, we want more H-1B types. We want to make that faster, more efficient, easier for you to get the best and brightest in here. And some of the MAGA faithful are like, huh? Them jobs is for Americans, native born. And like, what did you think you were encouraging, guys?
How long did it take at Ellis Island?
Probably like within days. Like let me check.
So they had no vetting then?
Very little.
Well, then I changed my answer. If they didn't do any vetting, that's bad.
They did do vetting at Ellis Island. Vetting, obviously, around that time is going to be very different. They're not going to pull you up in an Interpol database. Pisco is a liberally minded lawyer on YouTube. He recently debated one of Trump's former lawyers. He does great work on immigration issues and the recent Gulag deports to El Salvador. I'll look him up. Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.
And I think you agree with that.
Hold up. Let me check. Let me make sure, because I could be wrong on it being days. Let me make sure that.
Yeah, that seems like that's
time.
too.
No. It could. It very well could be even shorter than that too. So I have to check.
It was hours.
It is incredible how many things you wrote about, things that were undeniably, even obviously true, but that most Americans simply would never, ever believe. So take the...
Okay, I can't. I'm going to...
I'm
fall down
looking
rabbit
up
hole.
average
Looking at that guy's puppy vest.
processing time. Give me a second.
Because we both agree that there should be vetting. And if they're doing vetting like in an hour...
Approximately 3 to 7 hours. Wow.
3 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
Wow,
Now,
dude. Really? That's nuts. Yeah. No,
would you say that's too fast?
So then you disagree with that, correct?
I find it. I'm skeptical you can do proper vetting in that short of time frame, and I think you are too.
Wait, but so then you think that the group of people that's in the United States.
I think we can actually do all of the vetting that we need from any, whether they're an immigrant or an asylum seeker, in about the same amount of time now. Thanks to the technology that we do have. I mean, back with Ellis Island, they're going to end up probably playing like bigotry games with them. But right now, you can usually find somebody between, if they're networked together well enough, you can, background checks, Interpol checks, things like that, fingerprint checks. You probably can find enough to know whether or not they're going to be safe to allow in. And that seems to be Doug's thing. He doesn't want to allow a single criminal in. And remember what I said before. Is he talking about immigration or is he talking about tourism? Because if you applied these standards to tourism, I think that you can make the case, Doug can make the case, or one could make the case to Doug. Doug should be in favor of completely eliminating people visiting this country. Unless they're showing up here willing to move here. We can vet them. Like, you want to come to Orlando and go to Disney World? Fine. Give us your life story. If you're not capable of being a U.S. citizen, we don't want you being a U.S. visitor. I mean, it's only right. I mean, what are the risks?
Is sufficient enough currently, right, that we should maintain it, correct?
Maintain what?
The population, right? The population that came
good
from
Lord.
those immigrants.
Thanks, Michael.
Right? That population is good, correct?
Some good, some bad, just like the immigrants today.
Mostly good, correct?
We got to vet them.
Mostly good, though, correct?
So yeah, I would say so.
So that you
mostly good.
Wait, so you could say that you think that there should be a little bit more vetting, but the fact that they were able to do it in 3 to 7 hours, then, right, is actually diabolical, right? In comparison to the fact that it takes this.
What was different back in the early 1900s compared to today?
You tell me.
I'm asking you.
It's going to be less technology.
Well, the other problem is, like, it took them 3 to 7 hours to vet these people, right? And they weren't running them through multiple databases or fingerprinting them. We can do all that stuff now relatively quickly. Why doesn't it take us 3 to 7 hours to vet an immigrant? For like pretend, and I'm saying even for like an asylum seeker, like, it's one thing. They're like, okay, we're going to rubber stamp you, bam, you're an asylum seeker, you can stay here. Probably going to be about 5 years before you get your court case. Why? Vet them there. We could do that if We had the judges for it. Republicans didn't want to pay for the increase in judges to process those cases and increase the backlog. Sounds like they wanted it to be slower.
And what else? What about think what government's role has been and was?
So you're saying that like government's role wasn't to maintain the safety of people?
No. How many social programs were available in the early 1900s?
Not very many. I'm not disputing that.
Okay. So do you think there's more at stake?
So what he's acknowledging now is like, okay, you didn't have the safety protocols, you didn't have the social insurance, you didn't have the social welfare programs, you didn't have the layers of bureaucracy, and you probably didn't even have the layers of charitable and private organizations present. And yet we let these people in. Why? Because you need people to run a country. If you want a country, especially a country like the United States, which was a country of immigrants, you need them to come in. That's how you build up talent. That's how you build up some of those networks. You don't cast them aside because you haven't been able to, in the last 10 years, I haven't been able to figure out whether or not Dietrich is actually a good enough metallurgist for us to allow him to be a full-time U.S. citizenship. I think Dietrich should go back to Bavaria. Fuck Dietrich and his subpar
Compared to back then.
But my point is that you do agree with this type of immigration, and Trump supporters typically do agree with this type of.
Hey, if you can, I don't disagree.
And they typically agree with that, probably because most of the immigrants who came from there are European.
Parker's getting into the whole European versus people from other places.
Is your first name Parker?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure that we disagree on if you.
Is your name Parker? Yes. Maybe he wanted him to slip and tell him his real name. The difference today, I think that actually is his real name. The difference today is that they aren't all white, and that makes Doug uncomfortable because he devalues the culture of people from majority brown nations. He bases this entirely on economics. Yeah, I think so. Or at least, on the kind of pervert economic narratives that he thinks that right-wingers have a point about. Yeah.
You can vet efficiently. I'm all for that. If you can actually do a thorough vetting within an hour.
We can. We already can. The vetting, my God, man. The vetting is being done. And the asylum seekers that are usually allowed to stay here, they've cleared a background check. They've cleared the credibility, the fear credibility screening. They've cleared the criminal background checks. Some of them end up having to clear like a medical check to check to make sure that they're not, harboring something really contagious or something like that. Once that's done, they are then let go, and they are given an asylum date. They're screened. I would argue they are being screened much more thoroughly, much more exhaustively, much more penetratively than anyone who ever came in through Ellis Island. And yet they're being treated like dirty cheaters while they're residing here legally as asylum seekers. I have seen Doug have these conversations with people and refer to these people as being here illegally and being undocumented immigrants. They're not. They have a document. The document shows they're an asylum seeker. They're waiting for a court date. They've been vetted. Their asylum case hasn't been approved by a judge. That's the second step. At this point, Doug might as well just stop talking and put the mic directly next to his ass. What the fuck is he talking about? If someone wants to go in the U.S. because of social programs, that's a blithering idiot if I ever saw one. Exactly. And the only people on the fucking planet that think anybody wants a piece of the United States because of its sweet, sweet social insurance programs, that hammock, it's not a safety net, it's a hammock. You can kick back and sip pina coladas all day long because America is just so easy. Yeah, no, there's a reason we have a culture of rise and grind in this country, because this country has always been about and for hustlers. Always. We do not have a good social welfare system. No one is coming here to lay in a hammock. No one. If you want that kind of existence, you need to go someplace very, very different from here. You are on the wrong continent.
Ours? Sign me up.
Okay. Okay. So then you.
So we don't disagree on that.
So
But
you'd be
we
okay
both
with-
we both agree though that it vetting should be done, right?
Absolutely.
And we both
did
agree it should be done prior to entry, correct?
Not in all instances. We both
Right,
agree
right,
that.
right.
Parker's got to go back and keep his guard up here. Like, all right.
Mostly, right?
Oh, obviously that'd be preferable, right? But not in all instances would that be the case, and I'm
Okay.
okay with it not being the case.
So if you're okay with, or if you
You should see the hordes of people coming over the wall, making their way into Phoenix to take my office job. Yeah, no, they'll leave later in the summer when human beings are melting into the pavement.
if we agree that the vetting should be mostly done prior to entry, mostly, not all the time.
Say that's preferably to do so.
Would you say that's what happened in the last 4 years under the Biden administration?
For who, Doug? Immigrants or asylum seekers?
I would think plenty were, right, and that they.
Yeah, I mean the American dream was never really a thing. I mean, we got lucky with an economic arrangement post World War II, and even then we fucked it up by doing shit like redlining and a bunch of other crap. Affirmative action for white folk, except for white women. Of course, they had to stay in the house and bake cakes and shit. Yeah, the American dream is pretty fucked up.
Tried to do
The majority is my question.
They tried to do a policy particularly for that, and again, Republicans didn't want it, right?
But
Because
that
they
was my
followed
question. My
Trump.
question: do you think it actually happened? That there was thorough vetting prior to
Yes.
entry?
He doesn't. Okay, so now Doug is bringing up the specter of there was not thorough vetting during the Biden administration. Why or why not?
Typically,
Really?
Yes.
And so the vetting was just bad, and so many criminals did get through.
I think. Wait, so criminals?
How many? This does not account for any actual statistics. What he's talking about here. Actually, I think if they take into account the number of people, so the one thing that is difficult to track with this is the number of people with some kind of crime in their background check that are allowed to come in. I don't know if the standards are lighter for asylum seekers versus affirmative immigration seekers. But I do know that I think it was in 2023's numbers, the 3% or so that were denied full U.S. citizenship status were denied on the basis that they had some kind of crime that they committed after they were living in the United States, not before they entered, because they're going from being like, they're on a work visa, they're going for their green card / U.S. citizenship. They were denied that because of a crime that they committed while they were here, and most of those crimes can be minor. One of the top ones was like DUI, OWI. That's why they were denied that status. What he's talking about is they allowed criminals in. Well, you can find that out. Is there any evidence to suggest that USIS and DHS lowered the standards for criminal convictions for people who sought affirmative immigration, elective immigration, or people seeking refugee asylum status? Did they lower it? My understanding, my own capacity to research this shows that did not happen. The Democratic executive orders that Biden eventually issued, I think, also gave more authority to deny asylum claims. And that was included from language that was in the bill the Republicans refused to pass. So if they were concerned about that standard being weakened, they could have easily strengthened it by passing that law. And they didn't. So what the fuck is Doug talking about? Josh says, yeah, I think the asylum versus undocumented conflation really gives away the game. It was never about legality for right-wing, fast, curious people like Doug. Yeah, it's not. And the idea that he's talking about this like, well, I just want to have a conversation about immigration. Like, no, I don't think that you do. I think you want to flail around and fap around and ask weird questions and present questionable hypotheticals to left-leaning or liberal YouTubers to see if you can get them to say something that your audience, Doug's audience, will find, humorous or questionable. Or they'll just, what did he say? Capitalism's a joke, something like that. Like, what they laugh about over there is absolutely like just the most inane, banal, insipid nonsense. Like, this person he's over here just arguing. Like, you watch a guy who went on a show, called this kid, and talked to him for over 2 hours. And then they were leaving comments in Doug's thing saying, oh, this Parker kid just likes to argue. Parker does, not Doug. Did you believe him when he said he was just there to have a conversation? Because that's a game.
Where are you getting criminals? You're scared about criminals coming to the country, but you're not scared about them being president of the United
hang on. Do you disagree
You're not scared about them being released into the country by the criminal president of the United States? You didn't care about that.
Parker, true or false, criminals
I think he's getting to a January 6th thing.
Came into the country.
True or false, criminals came into the country. That's possible, but that wasn't his original issue. Not criminals came into the country. Criminals were allowed in. He's already moved the goalpost. He originally said they were allowed in. Who allowed them in? Now he's is it true that criminals came into the country? Probably. They could have been here visiting Williamsburg, for Christ's sake.
Obviously, there was some proportion of people, but it was a smaller proportion of people than natural
Correct.
U.S. citizens. So
Correct.
So now he's getting into a crime rate thing, which he should not do, but it's not a bad maneuver to make.
They reduce the probability of there being.
But I still think it's wrong-headed. The issue, I think he should have gone after Doug on the semantic side of it. Like, no, don't change that. Did criminals come into the United States? Probably. Did they come here illegally? How did they arrive? Did they parachute into Wyoming? I don't fucking know. It doesn't really matter since there's already plenty of American-born criminals right here, right now. Did some come in from someplace else? I don't know. I'm currently being held up by a drug dealer right now. Like, sorry, I'm worried about the all-American criminal with a gun in my face right now. Jesus Christ, Doug. But what if we let one in from Saskatchewan? Like, I think we did. I fucking think we did. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Not Saskatchewan. Apologies, Saskatchewan. Manitoba.
Violent criminals in the country.
Let's say it's 1/10 the normal population.
Can you repeat me what I just said?
You said that the immigrants coming in have a lower propensity to crime or a percentage of the general population than the Native American.
So if anything, they reduce the crime rate.
Okay. Yes. Now let me ask you: if we had,
so he giggled and said yes. He doesn't believe that. That did not process. The issue isn't that the number of them coming in necessarily reduces the crime rate. It's that the crime rate amongst immigrant populations is lower than it is amongst clusters of native-born U.S. citizens. So one could try to make the argument, well, wouldn't it follow then if we allow more immigrants in and increase the sizes of our immigrant populations and then maybe control the population of the native-born citizens, we can actually lower we can get that crime rate even lower.
You concede that. That's hilarious.
No, I can concede it, and still it doesn't change my point.
It does. If immigrants
Parker, listen,
the crime rate, then why are you arguing that they're bringing crime into the country?
True or false? Criminals entered the country during the Biden administration.
True or false? Right. There were less criminals, right, in the country, right, because of immigration to a higher extent.
That's a little bit flabby, but I know where he's going with it, so it's not. It's okay. Fabio asks a great question. True or false? Felons are elected president of the USA. Yeah, but it's not a real crime, Fabio. What Trump did was all American crime. Business documents fraud. I mean, you can't get much more American than that.
Yeah, as a percentage, I can give you that. But now, if you had 100, let's say there was only 100 criminals in the country, do you want it to be 101?
Well, and tourism is the reason for it. There were 100 criminals in the entire country. Now there's 101 because Giuseppe flew in from Sicily. He's here 3 days in Manhattan. I can't believe what this country's fucking coming to. I mean, there ought to be a law, right? What the fuck, Doug? You let a criminal in here. Let him in or let him stay? Let him stay or made him one of us? What are you talking about? What in the fuck are you talking about?
Just to lower the percentage?
If there were more people in the country, it would make sense.
So, okay, this is a fundamental disagreement I think a lot of people on the left and right have.
Okay, well then you don't want people to have more babies because there will be more criminals when they have babies.
Sure, if we could, in my opinion, if we could deport the criminals that are Native American, I would.
That came out a little weird, right? Okay. He doesn't seem to be following what Parker's putting down. If the native-born citizens produce more criminals than the immigrant communities do, then it stands to reason, if you want to control for crime, you want to make sure this population doesn't grow much. Maybe let this population grow a little bit more. And what Doug has moved on to is like, oh, no, I think it's perfectly fine that they take criminals and ship them off someplace else. That's a different issue.
What are you talking about, bro? I know.
What are you talking about? Seriously, Parker, would
you wanted to prevent? So I was just giving you an example, right? You should prevent people from getting more criminals into the country, right? From U.S.
and prevent tourism.
Citizens that would be born in the country,
right? But we can't deport. We can't
prevent people from giving birth.
Parker, we cannot deport U.S. citizens, but we can prevent entry of.
I'm going to repeat Doug here from earlier. Yet. We can't deport them yet. Trump's working on it.
Immigrants who are criminals.
And actually, you can deport them if they're terrorists. That's been something that's happened during, it's not called deporting. It's not deportation. They're renditioned.
For that.
Listen, but you can prevent, if you, in the same type of way, people from getting pregnant then, right?
You can prevent what kind of
this kid with his hair twisting and nail trim. He reminds me of myself when I was. How old is Parker? Is he like 15 going on 27? I can't tell.
Rabbit trail are you going down right now?
Birth control prevents people from getting pregnant, right?
So
Doug thinks that this is a rabbit trail instead of just Parker's own hypothetical. Doug is not following this, and I think it's pretty intuitive and it's not that complicated. Parker's like, look, you want to do something about crime rates in the United States. This population produces more than this one. You're very concerned about this population not increasing in size, but you're ignoring this one over here. Shouldn't we allow this population all of the birth control and all the very liberal rights to abortion, which I mean, it's also just birth control? Make sure they have all the access possible to birth control to keep that population in check. That way, you're not producing more native-born U.S. criminals. And Doug's accusing him of going down a rabbit hole.
Let me see if I can steelman you. You're saying
abortion
that
also prevents people from being pregnant.
Yeah. So you're saying that
Yeah, we'll be getting into that. That's how I'm going to be wrapping up, actually, Cascade. It's quite clear Doug is farming clips out of this guy. Yes, he is.
You are trying to say that we should allow criminals to come in because we can't stop people from having babies?
You're not listening properly.
No, I am listening. I'm trying to figure out what your point is.
He just tried to repeat it back, and he completely biffed it. Like Parker's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Wow. If that's what,
yeah.
You're not listening at all, right? I'm giving you a critique to your position in terms of a logical extreme, right? Because it is the case that you think that there's nominally more criminals in the country. That means it's a worse off set of occurrences, right?
Yes.
So if there were a greater population, right, of U.S. born citizens, right, there would be more crime nominally, right? But yet you would acknowledge that you would still see that as preferably.
Right. I would prefer less criminals. Yes.
Wait, no. Okay. If you prefer less criminals, well, then you prefer less Americans.
But the difference between, I see what you're doing, but the difference here is we cannot control that as easily as we can control immigration.
Oh, yes.
Unless you want to go if you want to force sterilization and that sort of thing.
No, you could make abortion legal in the first trimester. Am I right?
It is legal in the United States.
Oh, so you think it should be, right?
Well, it's legal in some states.
I'm actually yes. I think abortion should be legal. I would say before what most people would say consciousness or the neural network.
Then here's my question: would you vote for Donald Trump if it is the case that he like wanted to like leave women's right to vote up to the states?
Yes, I do think it should be a state thing.
Keep in mind what Parker just said there. Parker asked him, "You're willing to vote for Donald Trump if you left the issue of a woman's right to vote, not to choose, the woman's right to vote." He just switched it.
Women's right to vote?
Oh, women's right to vote? Oh, I thought you said abortion.
No, I'm talking about women's right to vote.
No, I would be against that.
Being left of the states?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't vote for him in that context?
It depends on who you're saying, like he's up against Harris.
Yeah.
That'd be a tough one.
So he wants to leave the right to vote for over half the population up to individual states. So certain states would be justified in denying the franchise to women. And he's a little torn about that if Donald Trump is running against somebody like Kamala Harris. I wonder why.
No, I'm laughing because how insane you are. The fact that you laugh is actually crazy. Dude,
no, Parker,
I'm laughing because I'm literally laughing out of how fucking crazy that is.
Parker, listen to me. This is going to be a tough question.
No, it's not.
If you're for all outcomes, I hope, like well-being, better society, right? You're for that.
Please.
I just want to. I just want to make that premise before I ask my question.
You don't know who you'd vote for if Donald Trump wanted to leave women's right to vote left up to the states.
I am saying that I am against that, but if depending on what other values that
But I'm okay for somebody coming in and removing the basic franchise of voting from over half the population to prevent the critical race theorist, whatever that means in his head, into office. I will do that because I am a deranged moron.
in issues and policies, it might outweigh it. But let me ask you this. If it were true that you would...
We're not talking about policies. Voting isn't a policy. Voting is a principle. You have a country that either allows for that kind of universal suffrage or you don't. And it took the United States a long time to get universal suffrage. Wanting to wind it back is not a policy decision. It's a betrayal of principles and an inconsistency tantamount with just deciding that, you know what, certain forms of murder are okay. If we're talking about principles, ethical or moral, what Doug is talking about is essentially no different than saying, okay, if we can conclude that there's a beneficial consequence for something, we can remove something principle. So let's say that the United States exists as a country that can guarantee that all of its citizens live to at least the age of 90. That's it. That's your guarantee as a citizen. You get to live to be at least 90 years old. Whatever your health conditions are at that point, that's going to be a combination of factors. But we can guarantee it. Statistically, we figured out exactly how to do it. Everyone makes it to the age of 90. In exchange for that, you as an American citizen have to agree to give up all forms of privacy. You'll be watched, listened to, and your biometrics monitored 24/7, nonstop. No reprieve and no requests for any kind of break will be tolerated. But in exchange for that, you get to live to be 90. These are the kinds of hypotheticals that Doug will throw out there. Now, it doesn't matter that that kind of constant surveillance is actually very, very harmful to humans, individually, psychologically, and then physically, and also collectively. But Doug's got a statistic right here. The country is guaranteeing you will live to be 90. And all you got to be willing to give up is any privacy whatsoever. Ever. Do you take it? No, because it violates an enormous number of principles. Most people would be like, you know what, I'll take my chances, but I want to be able to go camping and get away from it all and maybe turn off my phone, maybe not have the government monitoring my biome 24/7. It's a balancing act. Oftentimes when Doug starts getting into these parts of the conversations, I just think like he's like a little kid that just doesn't understand that what he's actually pushing for, what he's arguing for in most circumstances is like, well, look, if we can prevent even one death, no one should be allowed to own a gun. Well, let's explore that, huh? But as he's drifted more and more into kind of right-wing spheres, I'm kind of wondering if he would actually be amenable to that argument. What about a blanket ban? No one gets to own guns, ever. No guns of any kind. You can save at least one life. Okay. You just have to violate certain legal principles and things and some kind of common understood aspects of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I mean, I don't entirely agree with their translations, but they are established now. You just need to erase that and decide, no, the reason that we're doing that is because the benefits outweigh the risks. We think. You just don't get to do something, boo-hoo, cry your eyes out, but it saves like 5 people a year. If you're Doug, that has to work, right? That math has to math, from the sounds of it.
Would have a better society and outcomes, better well-being in a society if women didn't vote. Would you be for women voting still?
Yes.
Why?
He's already done it. If you could show that the society that you have would always be better as long as women never get to vote, wouldn't you have to come out against women voting? No. That is a ridiculous comparison. First of all, that would be like, even if you compared that to one thing, let's put it this way. The majority of American women who are Caucasian voted for Donald Trump. They should lose their right to vote. Would Doug be okay with that? They voted for a guy who is automatically harmful to most of their positions. Shouldn't they lose their right to vote? Wouldn't it be better if they'd not shown up? Or just not allowed to do it? Would he be okay then? I mean, my 401k would be better if Donald Trump had not had a second term. As of right now. So as of right now, I would have been better off if the deciding groups, white men and white women that voted for Trump and got him over the hump, weren't allowed to vote. So I want to put it out into the universe. I think that's a reason to make sure that they never vote again. That part doesn't follow. And Doug is trying to present it like, well, if you could say things will always be good so long as women never get to participate in the political process. How is one connected to the other? In any realistic way. This is not a good hypothetical. Doug seems to think that if he can present anything as a hypothetical, it has to be addressed and has to be taken seriously. And it simply doesn't. That is childish as fucking shit.
We end up with a worse society in this hypothetical.
Wait. So are you saying that
I'm asking you a question, Parker.
Yeah, I would prefer democracy over.
So you would rather? Okay, so you would prefer a democracy where you still have a democracy with men voting, but my question is a very tough one.
You saw a democracy with men. We saw a democracy with 90% of eligible voters not bothering to turn up, Doug. 90 million people, no, not 90%, 90 million registered voters in this country did not even bother to vote for either Trump or Harris. 90 million, that was significant. And he's actually doing the mandate thing. Well, now you see what happens when they show up and they give a shit. Okay. Let's get rid of their right to vote. I don't like it. I'll do Doug one even better. I declare myself Emperor of the United States, and I perform some kind of military junta, some military turnover. And then I start calling the shots. You can vote, but you can't. According to Doug's logic, I get to do that because I'm in charge. That's how he's actually argued this before. He kind of believes in a might makes right kind of philosophy. So I can just make that happen anytime I want. And given these goofy hypotheticals, if it turns out that that didn't work out that way, I can just tell people that it did. And if they turn on me, I can declare them terrorists and have them, El Salvadored.
I'll ask it again because I think you didn't quite hear me.
No,
So
I did hear you, and I did respond the way that I think.
So you rather have women vote in a worse society than only men vote in a better society?
In a logically consistent hypothetical, absolutely. Now, would you like to respond to the idea?
In a logically consistent hypothetical. I think the problem, though, is that what Doug presented is not really a logically consistent hypothetical because I don't see how those two things are connected. Because the hypothetical is asking for something to be guaranteed in perpetuity into the future. Nothing spins on that. If you're doing that in a localized choice, I would kind of get it. But doing this kind of thing like, well, isn't it the case? If you could provide for a better society, if you sacrifice at least one virgin to the volcano, wouldn't you have to do that? Yeah, except that humans can't predict the future. So it's predicated on a non-starter.
Idea that it is the case that not
See,
only
to me, that's laughable.
Wait, no, you know what's laughable? The fact that you would vote for someone who literally is against women's rights to vote. You understand that, right?
Is there someone against women's?
It could. I mean, I don't think that Parker hasn't actually plumbed the depths of Doug's misogyny here, but he's getting there. He's getting close.
Rights to vote right
Yeah,
now, or is this hypothetical?
You would vote for Donald Trump, even though he literally wanted to restrict women's right to vote.
How so?
By leaving it up to the states.
What
That's
are you
the
talking about?
That's the hypothetical.
Oh, okay. You're talking about hypothetical. Yes. Okay. Yeah. You gave me a hypothetical just now. I answered. I gave you a hypothetical, and we both think each other's crazy with our answers.
I understand that you think I'm crazy, but you're the one literally saying that you're okay with women not having the right to vote.
Right. And I understand that you think I'm crazy for saying that, but
because
you're the one who said that you'd be willing to have a worse.
You said because it creates a better society. You're presupposing there's a better society,
He just muted him. Watch this.
particularly from like women not having the right to vote. That is a presupposition that you're coming there. If you were to accept that.
Yeah, it is, AR. I mean, this is one of the things that I've been exploring a little bit more is that he will present these hypotheticals. And I think this is one of the reasons why his fans like him is that he has a tendency to present these in a conversation, and then it feels like you need to deal with them. But you don't. Most of these hypotheticals are like the hypothetical that you get from a kid. It does not. If you turn this around, if the logic were turned around, you're like, well, if I can guarantee that the future will always be good, everything will always be great, provided that Doug is confined in a pillar of salt, wouldn't you have to do that? And then Doug would be like, wait, what's the connection there? Like, there isn't one. There isn't a connection there. You're asking people to make a decision based on things that they cannot actually reason through. You're saying like, well, here's the thing. I know that you can't predict the future and I can't predict the future, but what I can guarantee you is a perpetually better future provided that these people can't vote. No. I'm sorry. Go back to something else. Figure out a different hypothetical. That ain't working. You need to come up with hypotheticals that don't involve magic.
That in application to society. I'm not disputing that. Absolutely, I would promote democracy and women's right to vote, right, over like certain types of conditions like that. Yes, that is something that I view as like morally valuable. That women have the right to vote.
Why do you view democracy?
You see it as morally valuable that women have the right to vote.
Yes, I do. And I already conceded that I wouldn't want women to lose the right to vote, but
he's okay with it if it means that Kamala Harris wins. Tom's new video is just an hour of VOR being intellectually dishonest. Who's VOR? What do you mean by that?
So, given that it is the case that Donald Trump was against women's right to vote, right, wanted to restrict it and leave it up to the states, tell me what about Kamala Harris? Today,
well, hang on. How do you know that?
Policy and about who she is as a person is worse than Donald Trump in that scenario.
Can you show me where Donald Trump said that he was trying to limit women's right to vote?
See, I'm giving a hypothetical to be able to show you that there's
Okay,
not
so you're not saying that he actually did that.
obviously. So
I think this is the second time Parker's had to clarify. No, I'm not saying that's actually the
I'm
case.
saying that there's not going to be a distinction that you can derive between a woman's right to vote and a woman's right to get access to an abortion. And
Yeah, this is interesting.
first trimester, given that you believe in that, if it is the case that you're going to say that you wouldn't vote for him in the context of like him wanting to leave women's right to vote up to the states. So it's about you. It's about questioning you in that context and being like, okay, what's the difference between these? To say that you'd support him in one scenario but not the other. Does that make sense to you?
That analogy, I can see where it sort of makes sense, but I would say that there is a big difference between letting the states decide. I don't think the right to bodily autonomy is nearly the same as the right to vote. And the Supreme Court ruling didn't.
No, they kind of are, because you're sort of acknowledging they both go back to personhood. So I think they're more closely connected than Doug would be comfortable talking about.
I have a great question for you, actually.
Hang on, you've been asking all the questions in the last 5 minutes.
I'm sorry. I have to answer this. I have to ask this because I don't want to lose it.
Okay.
If it were going to be the case that restricting men's right to vote, right, provided better outcomes, would you support restricting men's right to vote?
Yes.
So if somebody came and pitched him a perpetual future of positive results and constant societal benefit, provided that men are not allowed to vote, Doug would be for it. So what Doug is admitting to is that he would buy the bag of beans. Although it turns out those beans were actually magical. They just led to a murderous giant.
So we should restrict men's right to
In
vote.
other words, what I'm saying is
literally unironically, this guy is just going to argue, right? If we actually like look at reality and the way it is, that we should have restricted men's right to vote because they literally voted for Donald Trump, who actively tried to undermine our democracy, our rule of law, our constitution, who was held civilly liable of sexually abusing a woman, who bragged about walking in the changing rooms of girls' Miss USA because he quote unquote owns the place to inspect them without their consent. Literally, he cuts taxes predominantly for rich people at the expense of people who are in the middle class because tariffs regressively impact middle class individuals. So that's what you just did.
Now I think Doug's going to get triggered because he doesn't like speechifying. Nitty says, if I can legislate the degree to which women get medical treatment, I can legislate how much they speak for everyone else. Yes. Yeah, that's true.
Muted again? Okay.
Yeah, you are.
Parker, I have been pretty civil here, right? I'm just wondering why you keep muting me.
I've been pretty civil here. Why do you keep muting me? To get his...
If you think it's civil to dispute or to like literally say that you would vote for Donald Trump, even if it is the case that he would restrict women's right to vote, well, then you can say that. Also, you're not responding to the point. Would you in that scenario?
It's my turn to ask a question.
No, because you didn't answer my question.
Ron, I'll actually give Doug credit for biting the bullet there. I would too, except the fact that Doug is admitting that he would put himself in a position for accepting a ridiculous hypothetical because he thinks it somehow like logically follows. Like, it logically follows that we can have a perpetually good future provided that we deny one group of people the right to vote. Like, you can't get that thing because you can't ever get that thing. If you're going to throw around like hypotheticals with like magic, like it's fine that he's willing to do that. Like, oh yeah, no, I'd do the same thing. Cool. Well, in that case, then we could throw around any other magical one too. No one ever dies of a plane crash provided that everybody on board eats a baby. They collectively must eat a newborn, and that will guarantee that their plane never crashes. So since everyone is guaranteed to be safe, we have to feed them a newborn. It's just the right thing to do. And it will never fail.
Would you support you did support getting rid of men's right to vote then, right?
In that hypothetical, yes. And I can tell you why, but I would love to ask you a question and I could show you and I are not that much different. Ask you a
right to vote then, right?
In that hypothetical, yes. And I can tell you why, but I would love to ask you a question, and I could show you and I are not that much different.
He likes to do this. This to me always feels a little bit like the villain in a movie that wants the hero to recognize how similar they are. Like, I don't know why Doug goes there. Maybe he likes those kinds of movies, but
Parker, please. And again, I'm not here to make you look bad or anything.
He's specifically there to make him look bad. Doug did not go into this conversation. He did not call into this kid's conversation because he wants this kid to come across looking smart, reasonable, or good. Nitty says, I've been pretty civil, equals, I will farm you for moments where you are rightfully emotional and say, triggered lib. That's exactly what Doug is there to do. And now he's lying to himself and to Parker and to the audience. I'm not here to make you look bad. That's partially correct in Doug's deranged narcissistic worldview, because for him, he isn't there to make Parker look bad. He's there to watch Parker make himself look bad, as if Trump's goofy questions and weird propositions and goofy hypotheticals have nothing to do with the tone of this conversation. It's all just Parker. Look at him get emotional. Look at him wonder. Look at his face get all scrunched up. He's wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Why can't you understand Doug? Doug's just a salt of the mankind. I'm salt of the earth. I'm common sense. I'm just a farm boy from Manitoba. I'm not trying to be too clever here. I'm like, I know you're not trying to be too clever here. You're giving me My Little Pony hypotheticals and then getting mildly triggered when he gets like fucking muted so that Parker can complete a point. And now he's saying this shit? They've been talking for damn near 50 minutes and he's already bringing the shit out like, hey, I'm being pretty civil here. Hey, I'm really reasonable, man. Hey, I'm not here to make you look bad. That is precisely what Doug is there to do. If he really thinks that that's not what he's there for, then he is even more delulu than I thought he was. So, I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to show...
Let's just have a normal conversation. Is that okay?
Let's just have a normal conversation. Normal conversations do not include hypotheticals this stupid. I mean, they might if your cousin's on cocaine or if your 8-year-old nephew is going through something tough. But if you're talking to a 50-plus-year-old man, and these are the kinds of things that he wants to talk about. He started out, just to remind you, his primary reason for voting for Trump was because of his concerns about immigration, and none of his concerns about immigration appear to be linked to any actual realistic fact. He's concerned that they were doing it too fast. That's not immigration. That was asylum seekers. Those were refugee crises. Well, there's too many of them. Well, that can happen with refugee crises, but that's not necessarily an immigration issue. Well, it's happening unlawfully. Why is it happening unlawfully? What's being done illegally? What laws are being skirted? What corners are being cut? What's happening? He hasn't addressed a fucking thing about that. He stated that asylum claims from these asylum seekers, they're all full of shit. 96% of them, according to DHHS, they're credibly scared. Only 4% maybe spinning a yarn. So that completely contradicts that talking point of his. And as far as any of the other stuff goes, it's hard to tell where his concerns for affirmative, careful, elective immigration versus asylum seeking, the way they overlap in his mind, you can't tell what he's talking about half the time. He'll start equating, well, we got to be worried about crime. No, we don't. Not according to those statistics. Not as much as we need to be worried about the crime coming from those populations over there, our own. Well, we need to be worried about drugs. 87% of them are coming from U.S. citizens that are moving them across the border. So it's a point of concern. But they're not coming in with these people, at least not a tiny minority might, but the vast majority coming from American citizens moving them. That's not an immigration issue. That's a smuggling issue. Well, there's a health issue to be taken into account. You don't like wearing masks. None of this is grounded in anything real. The man is fucking deranged. He is out of his goddamn mind. And the only excuse, the only explanation I would take to him not being deranged is if he can tell me, if he can just admit to me that he is fucking lying all the time. because this has gotten so inconsistent at this point that the dishonesty is just at like it's at like at a 99%. It's just like this weird fucking high pitched whistle through everything that he fucking says. To this extent, I will stop sharing this. Actually, just exit that. Let's take a look here. Didn't want to make this guy look bad. He's not interested in doing that. So let's just take a look at this entire screen here. So as far as I can tell, this one here, Pine Creek is now a Democrat. This was something that he did maybe related to this whole thing. Here's a video, a 4-minute video clipped from their conversation. Here are some shorts, I think. Maybe didn't include that one. And here's the live that he did where he included it as well. So he wasn't about to make him look bad, but then he does this bit.
But Mike, I want to go back to immigration. And my question for you is a hypothetical question, because I love hypotheticals.
He loves hypotheticals, especially bad ones. So while this was going on, I decided that I would put in a question. So I wrote this, and it might be kind of hard to see, but it's you can't see this if you go and look this up. I've been blocked, so these don't appear anymore, but he didn't delete them, so they still show up when I look them up. Doug told Parker during this conversation that he, quote, wasn't there to make Parker look bad. This video alone is proof that Doug was lying. For everybody that's watching me in the chat, and I know that we're kind of a minority audience here, and I know that you're fans of mine. Do you think this accusation that Doug is lying is unfair? Just a yes or a no. Am I being unfair when I say that Doug is lying about that sentence that he presented to Parker? So he wrote back, I was there to have a conversation, but this was just a happy byproduct, which he did to himself. He followed that up immediately. I caught these both at the same time. By the way, I've had enough with this Doug is lying or Doug is dishonest crap. You'll be blocked forever by end of day. Okay. I wrote this. I don't know if he saw this. I said, you seek out conversations to mine them for content because you think they look bad and you want to broadcast that. You've been doing that for years. If you don't want to be accused of dishonesty, stop being dishonest. I doubt anybody actually saw that. So this to me is proof not only that he is lying, but he's been very sensitive about this because I brought this up when he made the claim in the last video. He made this claim that he wasn't really all that excited about what Donald Trump was going to do fiscally for the country. And I was like, well, that's a lie, because you told somebody just a few weeks ago that you had on as a caller that you were really excited about what the administration was going to do for the deficit. So what do you mean you're not interested? You're not enthusiastic about what he's going to do fiscally? And he came at me pretty hard. How dare you? You got some balls on you calling me a liar on my own show. I'm like, you are lying. And he's still doing this here. Like, dude, stop gaslighting people on their own fucking shows. You called Parker because he was live. You're punching up at a bigger YouTuber, and he's willing to take on all comers, you know, anybody that claims to be a MAGA supporter, and you go in there and have this conversation. I have not watched it much further past this point. That's why that's all I've ever really commented on. And now I can't. I plan on watching the rest of it. In fact, I might do another video later on, checking on it. But to me, this really gets to the heart of what's going on with old Pine Creek here. Somebody that is this sensitive to being called dishonest or being called a liar like this is really quick. I've been able to like sidestep around a lot of different things with Doug in comments and in conversations. I've called him deranged multiple times, and he actually kind of took that. But if you accuse a narcissist of being a liar, look it up. Look up what happens if you catch them in a lie, and then you call them out for being a liar. Their fragile little narcissistic egos shut down. You'll be blocked forever by end of day. That's it. Doesn't matter how many conversations we've had. It doesn't matter that the conversations that we've had, Doug, were conversations that I just want to have a conversation. No, now I'm being accused of being a liar. You're mean. Get away from me. You're gaslighting me. I don't lie. You lie all the fucking time. I'm pretty sure you're lying to yourself. This dude is not well in the head. And the people that are steadily watching him, if you watch some of the read some of the comments on here, what they're talking about, they are hilariously lacking in any kind of like self-awareness. It's quite remarkable. And most of the ones left, as far as I can tell, are just easily some of the greasiest trolls I've seen in a YouTube channel in a long time. So I'm happy to be banned from this, but it doesn't mean I'll never not cover this shit again, because, hey, I can't comment on this stuff on his channel, but that doesn't mean I can't make comment calling him a fucking liar as often as I want, because that's what he is. That's what he did to Parker. He lied to him multiple times. I only called out this one because this just happens to be one of Doug's favorite lies. I'm not here to make you look bad, bro. I'm just here to have a conversation. Ooh-wee. I'm just here I'm just asking questions. I'm just putting stuff out there, baby. And then 6 shorts later, and I'm like, look at so-and-so's hair burst into flames. Look at what Doug did to this libtard. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I thought you weren't there to make them look bad. Oh, but you're here now to make them look. Oh, okay. So you didn't know you were going to be mining this for content like you did with every conversation you've ever had. The dude's nuts. Flat out fucking nuts. Oh. He genuinely believes he is exploring the truth. He is cooked. Oh my fucking God, you think so? He also needs the affirmation of the 2 transphobes who still watch him, and that motivates him too. Only 2 transphobes watch him? I figured every transphobe in YouTube land watched him. Which transphobes do you mean? Do you know them by name, Digital Gnosis? I'm just wondering. And Doug's existence is performative. Yeah, it does seem to be. Yeah. Well, Mr. Poopy Buttle. Yeah, I can usually do it a little bit better, but I'm afraid if I go a little too hard, I'll like blow an O-ring or something. Ooh wee. That's about as good as I can get at this time of night. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, Nathan, you know him better, so that could be. But like, what did he abuse benzos or something like Jordan Peterson style? Like, what in the hell popped that like? Blew the fuse in his brain that he's doing this shit. Like, this is the kind of crap that I would have thought, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, I think when I started watching him, he would have caught on to like that. And now he's stumbling through it and bumble fucking his way through these conversations and acting like he's a fucking like a philosophy god or genius. Like, I'm just trying to keep it straight, bro. Like, you are not doing anything of the sort. You offer absolutely nothing except right-wing talking points and the worst fucking takes I've ever seen from somebody. And half the shit that you're talking about that you say claims ground your opinion is based on a fucking lie or some kind of delusion. Like, all of the narratives that are propping up this guy's basic opinions are bullshit. Almost all of them. I don't get this. I don't understand how somebody who claims to be a skeptic and claims to be a critical thinker can fall for this shit to this extent. I get that we all have blind spots, but holy fucking crap. It's like one eye is dead. He's just outside his fucking mind. So, with that being said, I think I'm ready to wrap it up because I've ranted enough. But yeah, so I can't comment on his stuff anymore, which is fine. I mean, I can rant about it here, but Yeah. Yeah. The moment where Parker's compassion overloads. Sorry for the audio imbalance. That portion, I think, is actually one of the parts that we went over, except we get into a part later. This one is clipped together. There's a part where somebody brings up in the live chat, I think it's in this video, somebody during Parker's live chat brought up the fact that Doug got called out for posting a derogatory X post, Twitter post, something like that, or a YouTube post, probably both, about Kamala Harris. And if you watch this clip, he never admits to Parker that he did it. He just tap dances all the way around it. If you look at the comments here, there is an exchange between him and, I believe, my brother. Yeah, here it is. That's not what I wanted to click. Did Doug post the meme or not? And Doug replied, yes. Do you want to see it? And I asked him, why didn't you answer Parker this directly? Jay said, sure. Here's the link for it if you want to see it. It's either a Family Guy or an American Dad clip. And instead of I don't know who the character is exactly. I don't know if it's Peter or not, but it's just got her face kind of superimposed and it's checking a border crossing, checking to make sure the skin color's right. And he asked him, so why didn't you just admit you posted the meme? And Doug says, well, I didn't deny it, but I honestly don't know what he was talking about until after I looked it up. I post a lot of videos. Now, you probably won't believe me on any of this because your dislike of my politics skews everything to the negative. I'm willing to actually agree with him there, mostly because Doug's politics are almost all negative. All of Doug's politics seem to revolve around him being overly concerned with what people deserve and extremely preoccupied with keeping the undeserving away from everything. So Jay asked him, why would you think I wouldn't believe that you would post a meme that makes fun of Kamala Harris? I couldn't figure out where the tangent was coming from. And because of your question, why didn't you just admit? It sounds like you were assuming bad motives of me. Yes. Jesus, Doug. Yes. I assume bad motives from you. I assume that when you tell a kid that is starting to get a little worked up, hey, I'm being civil, aren't I? Aren't I being reasonable? Can't we be friends? Aren't we just chatting? Aren't we just spitballing things here? I'm not here to make you look bad. 4 critical short videos later, with him patting himself on the back. Look at me trigger this lib over here. What a lib cuck. What a beta. Yeah, Doug needs to get off social media almost as much as I do. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you, folks, in the live chat, and thanks for tuning in. I'm sorry this one went on as long as it did, but yeah, this dude, I mean, he's got ramen for brains. This is unbelievable. He needs to get checked out for worms or something. I will check back in later for another live stream, and until then, if anybody's got anything, shoot me an email or whatever. I'll do my best to actually check my email and respond, but if not, we'll see where we go from there. Have a great weekend, everybody. If Easter is your thing, I hope you have a good one. If Easter is not on your radar, enjoy it anyway. Not the holiday, but the day. With that, I will get out of here. So catch you later, folks. Have a good night.